So just a quick introduction. This is apparently going to be the track in which the speakers introduce themselves, which is kind of fun. No, come on, it's fine. Yeah, you're too late. Yeah. So I'm Josh. I'm here wearing a bunch of different hats. I'm the chair of the Apereo Foundation. I do contract work for one of the firms in Apereo's commercial ecosystem, Unicon, and I also have a business in which some business partners and I do leadership courses and coaching for higher ed and nonprofits. So we focus a whole lot on higher ed IT and higher ed libraries. So what I wanted to do is to bring in a little bit of the team's work that I've done in that context into this context. Come on in, welcome. So the TLDR here is that teams are hard. We all know that the teams are rough, and helping teams be as effective as they can be is much more of an art than a science. So I wanted to, in a group here this morning, poke at some aspects of what makes teams, what can make some teams more effective than others. And I want to re-invite everyone to come on up, because this is going to be an even smaller conversation. So I had in mind groups of 5, and we are not quite 7. So maybe we'll just sort of form ourselves into a single group if folks want to do that. So you're welcome not to, but I invite you to. All right, so we're gonna start you off with an activity before I do a little bit of storytelling, and then we do a little bit more time in an activity. So the TLDR here is there are 2 things, and I'll circle back to this in the storytelling component. There are 2 things that are characteristic of the most effective teams according to Google's research back in 2012. And this is also part of the research that Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School has done into psychological safety over the course of her career. So those 2 things that Google found that are characteristic of the most effective, most nimble, most innovative, most fun teams are 2 things. One is that they're really good at making sure that everyone has equal time to talk. And they're also really good at keeping an eye on who is feeling good and who is feeling less than good in a group setting, in thinking about visual cues and body language and also tones of voice. So both of those are aspects of psychological safety. So we're going to look at that in 2 different ways. So the first way that I want to propose is what I'm going to call a bug stories activity. Then I'll do a little bit of storytelling, maybe 5 minutes of storytelling, and then I'll invite you to join into a feature request activity, which will be done in rounds. So if you've done rounds before, this is a structure that you can take back to your teams, where you can think about how to help the teams that you're on achieve equal airtime. And then we'll do a little bit of debriefing on the way out the door about what might have been interesting or surprising about what you just did. So let's start with bug stories. So I would invite you at this moment to find someone that you don't know very well. So I'm going to ask you to pair up, find someone you don't know very well, and then each of the person in these pairs, each pair partner will share your name, a project that you're on, maybe you're on multiple, or the institution that you're from if you're not on an open source project, and a very short bug story. So I'm thinking about, what is the most memorable bug that you have directly encountered? So what is a sentence or 2 about what transpired in that situation? And what is one thing that you learned from encountering that bug directly? So the idea is, one partner will share all of that in 3 minutes, and then you'll switch. And then the other partner will share all of that in 3 minutes. And then we'll do a little bit of debriefing. So I will ask you to listen pretty carefully to your partner's story. And I'll ask for volunteers to tell their partner's story. This is always kind of fun from a getting to know you perspective, from a engaging your partner perspective from a psychological safety perspective. So the trick will be one or two of us will tell our partner's story. So if I can invite you to find a pair partner now, someone that you don't know very well, and then we will start the clock on 6 minutes of sharing. So go find a pair partner. All right. So your time starts now. So the first partner can share about your name, your project, your ridiculously short bug story that you've encountered, and one thing that you learned from that situation. If you haven't yet switched, now's a good time. But I think two of the three groups have. So if you haven't switched yet, now's a good time for it. So I'll give you a 30-second warning before we pull everyone back together for some conversation. All right, so let's come on back together, and I have two mics in my hand, so I want to give this one out, and I want to invite anyone who wants to tell their partner's stories. So, and I would invite you to tell it in this way. So, what's their name? What is one sentence that summarizes their story? We're going to get radical distillation here, and then what's the one thing that they learned that they shared with you? So can I invite someone to tell their partner's story? Stephanie.
All right, this is Allison. I was about to say Alyssa. Sorry, Allison. And her bug story was about code of conduct in a particular project she was working on, which seemed to bring out people not necessarily nice reasons for using the code. I mean, using nefarious use of the code of conduct to injure people that maybe were like they didn't like, and as opposed to actually the reason why. And the one thing that she learned was that even if you have those situations, you still need to follow the process so that you're showing respect for the code of conduct. And then I think that makes it more integrated into what you're doing, and then it actually ultimately works out the best for the code and for the group. So.
All right, thanks. Does anyone else want to tell their partner's story? All right.
Okay.
Let's hear Patrick's story.
Okay. So my name is Virginia, and this is Patrick, and he is. I don't know. Your project is the Apereo Foundation. I don't know. That's your project. And
I didn't say what my project was.
what is your project?
It was actually at SUNY. It was a data management project.
SUNY. Okay. And the project and the bug story was that essentially this university was trying to move data from point A to point B, and it wasn't making it all the way, and it was like a big long back and forth to try and figure out why the data wasn't being transferred, until they found out that there was like an alumni volunteer who thought that he was just supposed to delete the data as soon as it came in.
Nice.
And the moral of the story was that a lot of the bugs are human things and communication things, and not just technical things.
All right, thanks. That's great. Would either of you like to tell your partner's story? Passing is okay. So would you want to, or you'd rather pass? Okay. All right, that's fine. All right. So time for a little bit of storytelling. Thank you for taking that and running with your partner's story. I appreciate that. So I want to do a little bit of storytelling here about Google's Project Aristotle from 2012. And so this is the question that they raised was why are some teams really effective? Why are they fun, nimble, productive, innovative groups, and why are others not? So they, at the time, Google had 200 teams, and so it made a whole lot of sense to figure out, why this might be. And so this project was meant to study lots and lots of those teams at Google, and they did a review of the relevant peer-reviewed literature around teams, and they asked themselves, were the best teams maybe made up with people who had similar interests? Do they respond to the same kinds of rewards maybe? Do they socialize outside the office? Do they have the same hobbies or the same backgrounds? What about teams where everyone is a big talker, or teams where no one is a big talker? You know, what are the patterns in which that you can identify that are characteristic of high-performing teams? And so the crazy thing was, in their study, they didn't find patterns like any of those. So there were relatively few patterns that they could find until they started to lock into this idea of psychological safety. So what they did find was that teams that were effective were ones, as I mentioned before, I gave away the punchline to the story before, but the teams that did best were the ones that allowed each other to speak in equal proportion, that had equal airtime, and the ones that had what the project called high average social sensitivity, and that's basically a good sense of where the people in your team might be emotionally at any given moment. You know, who's doing okay, who's feeling upset, who's feeling left out. So the teams that could do those two things were the ones that really knocked the ball out of the park. And the teams that couldn't, no matter how talented the individual contributors were ones that tended not to be able to be all that effective or all that innovative. So our bug story activity explored social sensitivity a tiny bit. So, you know, under the guise of trying to figure out, you know, what was a challenge for your pair partner and what your pair partner might have learned, and then sharing that information yourself. So I want to follow up with another activity which focuses on the principle of equal airtime. So, and this is a technique called rounds. You can do this in your teams, at your institution, or in your project. I've done it with lots of different teams in lots of different settings, and it is super simple, but on the other hand, it really changes the dynamic of a conversation. So how does this work? So we're going to do 2 rounds, and I think what I'll do is I think I'll ask you to form into a single big group for the purposes of this activity, because we're only 6, so that should be plenty. So you'll each get to speak in turn. You'll each have a minute in each round to share your response to a question that I'm going to pose. And the trick is to speak only when it's your turn, and not to speak when it's not your turn. So this probably sounds a little rigid, it sounds a little weird, but on the other hand, what teams often find is that it makes space for everyone to offer their best contribution. So it'll be very interesting to see what your experience is like this morning. So I'm going to ask you to do 3 rounds. So one is, and this will be under the heading of, you know, what might be a meaningful new feature for a particular project. So this is a little bit arbitrary, right? I'm trying to think about what is a setting in open source land where people might have to make a decision or source lots of views from lots of different people. So so I'm curious to have the group choose, in the first round, brainstorm a setting and a feature that you're going to be talking about. It really doesn't matter what that is. You know, so the trick is just to, in the first round, choose the context in which you're going to be talking some more. So then in what we're calling round 1, I'm curious to hear from each person, what's one bit of knowledge that I can contribute that's going to help my team? So thinking about your own expertise and what you can bring to the puzzle. And then in round 2, I'd like you each to think about, what is one thing I might learn from someone who has expertise that is different from mine? So this is the idea that, especially in open source teams, we're all bringing something different to the table. And a lot of times the trick is to make sure that we're giving enough airtime to both the things that we're bringing in and the things that we're trying to learn from other folks. So let me ask you all to pull in even a little bit closer. There's a guy I work with at Unicon who talks about smelling each other's sweat, and it's kind of gross, but very, very apropos in this particular setting. So each round is going to be about 5 minutes long, and I will serve as timekeeper. So let's start off with Patrick. So your first round, each of you has a minute to propose a frame for the rest of this conversation. So a situation, a feature that you might be discussing. So suspend your disbelief and offer up to the group some sort of frame for the rest of this conversation.
Improving the FOSSY website. Do I just talk about my gripe, or is that just the context? So that's people can better. I'm adding a feature, or is that just the topic?
That's good. I mean, you've got a whole minute to kill here, right? So you don't have to fill the whole thing, but yeah. So suggestion 1: improving the FOSSY website. It's probably something about the schedule in German, right?
Seriously? I thought it in Indonesian.
Internationalization is strong with this group. So, Allison, how about you?
I don't know. How do we apply these team building ideas to our open source projects or academic projects?
So,
That one. Can I just say I like?
agreeing with someone else is okay. Passing is also okay. Both are acceptable.
I think I like the idea because I do think that the discussion about bringing in some of these team building efforts into to academic settings and academic meetings, I think would be really interesting because I don't think that that's a norm necessarily. So I think I would kind of basically mirror what Allison just said.
Let me think. So I don't write software. I do more support type stuff. So a lot of this discussion around software writing is not directly applicable to anything that I'm doing. One thing that I'd love to see discussed is sort of breaking down the support binary between IT and research in the university, where they feel like very separate domains that have a transactional relationship between them, and getting that to become more cooperative and getting it to where they, these different groups feel more comfortable sharing information between them and feel like they're actually collaborators on a project.
Thank you.
Opening up the path for learning how to program and do software engineering to people outside of academia. So I don't know if that looks like getting them to enroll in MOOCs or some of those open programs that are offered by academic institutions, or just building up in the open source community kind of the tools and resources for people to start contributing, and then also starting to learn the foundational fundamental skills needed to do software engineering.
Okay. And last but not least.
So I like all of the ideas that are shared. The one that came to mind for me, I don't have a specific vision for the improvement I want to see, but I wish it were easier to I wish GitHub were a better platform for talking about the software. And when I look through old GitHub threads trying to figure out how the software works, where people have done an issue and there's a conversation with 50 comments on it, I don't know, maybe we could get AI to summarize those conversations and explain how the stack works, or I don't know. I just wish that the GitHub threads were better.
All right, so we've got a couple of different things. We've got some UX ideas that have been proposed. It strikes me that 3 of you that you three are sort of are talking about similar kinds of things, a similar kind of domain, so how to bring some of these techniques back, how to bring teams together. I mean, I think that the siloing that you're describing is a function of when two interlocking teams, maybe forming a single team, don't see themselves that way, and instead they see themselves as separate units. So my proposal to put forth is maybe to pick the idea about team norms, because it seems to be about half of what the group is into. So will that suit? Okay.
I'm embarrassed that mine was so trivial, and all of you.
Well,
Need
two
more
of them
time to
were
think about
UX oriented. We've got like GitHub threads over here. All right. All right, so this is going to be our first real round, so 1 minute each. So what is something that you can bring to this conversation from your expertise?
And the conversation is again.
Conversation is leveling up group norms to make teams more effective. Did I do okay synthesizing that?
And I just say what my relevant background is related to that.
So based upon your background, what's something that you could bring to what's something you could contribute to make this go forward?
I think I've worked in a lot of different types of teams within organizations, from working as a programmer analyst on a campus to IT manager, wholly an academic position. So maybe all that experience will help me to reflect on the issues that were impacting us at those different types of roles. And if I can remember back to my 20s, what it was like to work in that time and with those types of folks. And I've also worked in very senior roles in universities where I probably pushed activities on folks that they didn't like, and maybe I can also reflect on that and offer insights on why that might have been the policy versus the preferred way of working.
All right. Yeah, seriously.
Put you on the spot. I mean, I think relevant to yours, I've worked in IT. I worked in IT at the University of Portland, and I did have that sense of like there was this sort of like wall of separation between them. And it's weird because we were often, like using all the same tools or, yeah. So, I mean, I think tying that into the team building in academia and open source, I think one of the things OSPOs might be able to do is help draw that link, because like when you're building collaborative open source communities, part of it is crossing boundaries, right? So if you have people in IT who are working on open source or deploying open source for people to use, or you can kind of help draw them into the conversation as like equals and collaborators. Because I've also worked in university research. I've also been a professor at a university, so it kind of like crossed all those lines. And like people do, but it's rarer than it should be, weirdly. Yeah. And I think there's a lot that the people who are deploying the campus software can contribute to the conversation if they're kind of like pulled into it.
I always find myself to be the person that knows a little bit about a lot of things. And I think that is why I work well in an OSPO, because I'm not necessarily the expert on particular parts, but I can understand I can see their perspectives, even if I'm not like engrossed in what it's specifically doing. And I think specifically to the question that you were raising, but also other bridges that need to get built within the universities, and removing silos and that type of thing. That's I think my approach has always been to kind of understand the different needs of the different stakeholders. And I mean that's what I've historically tried to do when I'm bringing groups together. So I think that's what I would work. And yeah, I do agree that the OSPO is kind of well suited, or OSPOs or OSPO like organizations and universities kind of well suited to deal with like the specific and siloed issues that you were talking about.
So outside of work and outside of tech, I live in a housing cooperative, which is intentionally horizontally organized. And we have a strong focus on, how to collaborate effectively and how to resolve conflicts in like a direct but respectful way. And we sort of, you get practice with it because it feels more real when the conflict is in your living situation and like in, your food situation or whatever. Like, not that there are terrible fights, but it feels much more important for us to resolve those because it's not only about software, it's about our life. And so I have a decent amount of practice with that in sort of that situation. It feels like it's relevant to bring those skills into work and into software from housing.
Maybe one way to break down some of the boundaries or siloing is to take, maybe half a day or a day a week and have people from those different teams try to take on the roles of the other teams. Without adding too much burden or like having it be too high stakes, of just seeing like a day in the life type situation, and so they can have a little more empathy for what everybody else is dealing with.
So I keep thinking about job experience where it was kind of my job. It was like they should have hired someone with more experience. It's basically my job to like lobby the executives to like create a data management department. And I ultimately failed pretty spectacularly. But I learned a lot in the process of like trying to get a little initiative up and running and trying to get, oh, maybe we could be just a volunteer group. Oh, maybe we should be a formal department. Maybe it should just be a collaboration between these departments. And I think trying a bunch of stuff that failed, and some things that succeeded in and did persist. I think I learned a lot about how to start something new. And how to be sensitive to the existing expectations and change them in ways that feel safe.
Nice, thank you. So you're gonna keep that because you're gonna go first. This is gonna be like Uno reverse. We're gonna go back around the other way. Yeah, that's right. So all right, so second round, and it is 21 minutes past the hour. So I'm gonna ask you each to observe the 1 minute rule. I'll give you a gong sign, to sort of move you along. So what's one thing that you'd like to learn from somebody else who's in the group? So Virginia, starting with you.
My answer is going to be really similar to the answer I just gave, which is like to kind of learn from people who've had more experience working in different configurations of teams, working in industry maybe, because I have a very academic background, and just, what are some of those structures that you've tried and what worked and what didn't?
All right, thanks.
I also kind of work more in the technical side of things, so learning how to handle conflict resolution, and also some of the softer skills needed in working in teams with people.
I work more on the support side of things, but I'm trying to get better at coding and eventually contribute to open source projects. So I'd love to learn about sort of the community norms that open source projects have, and how they tend to communicate and how they tend to resolve conflict, and what that looks like, and sort of get familiar with that, feel more comfortable with open source contributions moving forward.
Yeah, me too. I'm not from the technical side. I'm from more the soft skill side, and I think that what I would like to get is, especially from learning from like the IT folks or maintainers, like really getting to a good feel for the needs that they have, and trying to avoid, but particularly as trying to avoid something like burnout in like a lot of the situations that I see in the different projects that we are hoping to support. So.
Quickly too, which is I'm fascinated about cooperative housing because it sounds so similar to open source communities, but I haven't really had much experience in that area. but then also kind of the university OSPOS things, like that's something I would love to learn more about, because it's very much tied into like, the needs of the university and the long-term growth of the university and funding sources changing. And, it's got so many dimensions to it. It'd be really interesting to learn more about it.
I'm on the spot.
That's right. Yeah. How does it feel to be last?
Yeah. Sort of tied into all of this, I think, I was going to say the motivations, the ways to understand the motivations for people's interest in things, what inspires them, and so on. But it's also how to remove the barriers that are either we assume is blocking us from working with folks, or whether that's that they're in IT and I'm not a developer, so I can't do this, or I haven't done this before. Like, what are those, both the motivations that spark the interest, but then what are the things that keep you from doing it? And how do you solicit that from someone so that they feel that they're authentically, it doesn't seem like just some shtick that some manager's coming in to say, hey, tell me about yourself,
All right. Thank you. So, all right. So it is, it's about 24 minutes past the hour. So I want to close by asking you to reflect a little bit on what you just did. So my question to each of you, and we're not going to go in rounds this time, so whoever wants to speak can speak. As you think about a conversation that took place in rounds with relatively equal airtime compared to conversations that you are in different settings, I'm curious if you could share one thing that surprised you about the conversation that we just had. So who would like to share one surprise first? Oh, Patrick wants to go first.
I just say, and I can't read, is it L? I can't read your name tag there. I really like the idea of we used to do this thing, take your boss to work day. And it was like, come see what I have to deal with when and so I thought of that as what my question was. And as I was thinking, or the thing I wanted to learn, and also the idea of the community housing and how that makes you put yourself in the other person's shoe and like, oh, sorry I ate all your ding dongs or whatever. So, so I guess that was that. It wasn't so much a surprise, but a different way to articulate the same and an approach to address the same topic I was interested in.
Nice. Who else would like to share a surprise? All right, Stephanie.
I'm not sure it's a surprise as much as just a nice feeling of how I felt that everyone felt, and just from the process of that we went through, that people felt more able to feel open about what they were saying and no pressure on it. So sometimes I think in meetings, people are like, it just seems like you have to say things a certain way, or you don't feel like you can be as honest. And I think that this process kind of helps people really to put out what they are thinking or what they're really feeling as well. So I think that was one of the things I'm not sure if it was a surprise, but it was something that was nice to see. So
yeah, thanks. Any other surprises that folks would like to share? Yeah.
I'm usually more of a talker than a listener in meetings, unfortunately. And it was maybe not surprising because I knew this would happen because of the format of it, but it was really refreshing to be able to hear everyone's voices to similar extents. And I was also a bit surprised at how back and forth communication and like replying to people and stuff still ended up happening. Even though it was within this, we go around the circle again and again kind of format, people still ended up talking about other people's things and adding on to it.
Did you find that the natures of the replies were different in some way?
Maybe a little bit better thought out, because it's like sending letters as opposed to saying text messages where like, it'll be a little while before it comes back around to you again. So you have to come up with a few sentences to say instead of just like bouncing back and forth real fast. And I'm not sure whether I think there's cases where each approach is valuable, but this was neat to see.
All right, thanks. Any other surprises that folks would like to share before we wrap? All right. So do you have a surprise also that you want to share? Okay, so I'm going to give you the last word.
Okay, I don't want to end on a sour note, but it wasn't a positive surprise exactly. I liked the format, but I did find it was a little hard to listen when I was like calculating my answer, and I was like, okay, I have this much time to say come up with something insightful. So that might be a room for improvement.
Yeah, that is one of the challenges, right? Is not is listening to listen, not listening to speak. You know, and I think in a way to address that is to make clear that one of the norms in a conversation like this is people can pass. So, you know, if you don't have a thing, or you know, or if you would really rather listen to the folks around you as opposed to, you know, thinking about your thing, you know, that's a norm as well. The other way in which some of these conversations can be approached is to give people a chance to think first. You know, so there's a classic think, pair, share, or think, share methodology that's used in teaching. I mean, so this would be along the lines of think, share. You know, so like everyone gets 30 seconds to collect their thoughts, especially good for the introverts among us, myself included, and then we get to talk. So yes,
Real
please,
quick.
absolutely.
I also I had the opposite experience when we were doing the pairs,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay, I know I'm gonna have to retell Patrick's story, so I better listen carefully. And I found myself listening really. That felt like a really good format for listening.
Okay. Yeah. You know, and what's also striking is that different people need different things at different times, right? So I appreciate what you shared, and lots of people have that experience at different times. So, you know, there are lots of different ways to draw your teams out, and so really, my offer to you was a couple of different ways and a couple of different ways of thinking about it. So, it is. It is 12:30 on the nose, so let's call it there. Thank you all for playing along, for suspending your disbelief. I appreciate it.